Hey everyone, it's Sam from Moneywise. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to try out different correspondents from Moneywise, which means you're going to hear from different people telling different Moneywise stories. Today's guest correspondent is Harry Morton. Now, here's what I need from you. Tweet at me. I'm at the Sam Parr. Let me know what you think about Harry. If you like him, we're going to ask him to come on more and tell more stories. And if you don't, we won't. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode and let me know. Again, I'm at the Sam Parr on Twitter. Now back to the show.
I think a lot of people who are more like cognizant of the life they want to live do reach that point where maybe they do make things bigger and then they go back and simplify.
When we start out making money, a lot of us have a goal number in mind. How much is all we need, and at what point does it all become unnecessary excess? The problem is that often, once you've hit that number, the goalposts move. But for Laura Roeder, they didn't.
The only point of the money is to exchange it for other things.
When Laura started out, she set a goal to have $5 million liquid. And now, with a net worth of $15 million, she's more than hit that, and she's set. She doesn't see any reason to grow more. And here's the thing, she's really enjoying it. In this episode of Moneywise, she talks about how she keeps herself from getting on the endless treadmill for more. We'll learn how much enough was and what her lifestyle actually looks like. And speaking of lifestyle, we'll talk about why she says there's nothing wrong with running a business simply to support that lifestyle.
What is the point of having a business if it's not supporting the lifestyle that you want? I just genuinely don't get it. I'm just like, get a job.
I'm Harry Morton, and this is Moneywise. Instagram is full of quick tips on getting rich, but rarely do you find advice on handling life after wealth. But those conversations are happening right inside of Hampton, a community for CEOs and business owners, so we decided to make a podcast to make those private conversations public. On Moneywise, we talk to people who've made a ton of money and how it changed their lives. They get brutally honest about their finances, their expenses, portfolios, and the personal challenges that come with success and how they manage them. If you're a startup CEO, you've got to check out joinhampton.com to connect with other really successful people. They put on a ton of awesome events throughout the year where you get to meet these people in person. So go check it out, joinhampton.com. We'll start by getting to that number we talked about, the one that she came up with and has stuck to, about how much is enough for her. Compared to a lot of people we've spoken to on this podcast, that number is a bit surprising.
I had a financial goal to be able to live without working, basically. And I had a clear number that I always had in my head, which is if you have 5 million and you follow the 4% rule, you get 200,000 a year. I've always found that like 200,000 is plenty to have a really nice life. It can be a bit nicer if you have a bit more. I couldn't tell you exactly when I formulated that goal, but that was definitely a number in my head for a long time.
Like I said, it's not an outrageously large number. And here's a spoiler, she has a decent amount more than that, but let's back up. This conversation is basically about recognizing when you're content and adjusting your lifestyle and earnings to account for maximum happiness instead of accumulation. That's not nearly as easy as it sounds. The thing about building wealth is that more you have, the easier it gets, which means to stop and smell the roses, you need more of that willpower at every stage. And then there's the added factor of being surrounded by people who are more and more successful than you. You make $1 million, you're in a room of people that make 10. You make 10, and you're in a room of people who made 100, and so on. It's hard to look at those people and not think, oh, I guess I should be working like that too. And whether you know it or not, you are doing that. Willpower is something that Laura is full of. And that goes back to something that not all of us have, a solid foundation.
I was very lucky to get a really solid financial foundation. So my parents are great with money. They did talk to me about money. Like they told me things like never have a car loan. I remember that was a big one. They're like, always just get a car, that you can afford to pay in cash. Don't get a loan for a car. Never have any credit card debt. That was really important to my parents, that like no one should ever have any credit card debt. They didn't have any. So I think I was very lucky that I got some really good kind of base financial concepts. My dad and my mom, and, they were married and they still are married, they do have completely different kind of scarcity mindsets. So my dad, when I was a kid, he had a Mercedes, which was really fancy. Like he really liked to have a nice car. My dad, he's an architect, so he's like a design kind of style guy. Like he really likes mid-century furniture in his house, stuff like that. And my mom is just like reuse every plastic bag 50 times. You know, you can only buy like she gets everything from garage sales. She still loves, in Austin, there's a day, like they call it Big Junk Day, where you put out like your big stuff out on the curb to get collected by the trash. And my mom's like, yeah, Big Junk Day, like free stuff. Like last time I was home, she'd found a bean bag for the kids. She's like, look, they're going to love this bean bag. I got it for free on Big Junk Day.
Amazing. I mean, that's quite a combo, right? So you got the kind of your dad that likes mid-century furniture and Mercedes, and your mum who's like picking up bean bags off the side of the street. Like, where do you land on that spectrum?
I'm like, well, I've never picked a bean bag up off the street. Oh, well, that's not true. It's not beneath me. It's not beneath me. So yeah, I definitely am more on my dad's side where I will buy myself nice things, but I do often have to give myself a kind of pep talk. Like, to jump ahead a bit, I think one of the most, to me, extravagant spending I've ever done is hire a really amazing interior designer for our house. So I love interior design, always read interior design magazines, and I had always wanted to work with an amazing designer, but it was just this thing in my head where I'm like, that's so expensive. They probably pick out really expensive furniture and really expensive everything. And when we renovated this house we're in now, I was like, this is my chance. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to hire someone, you know, who I really love their portfolio, even if they're expensive. And it did. I really, really, really had to convince myself, you know, that it was okay to spend money on something so kind of frivolous, I guess.
And were you okay with it when you pulled the trigger?
Yeah, I mean, I always find like this is something that my husband and I always talk about. If we have the money, we should spend the money because we never miss it later. Like every time we're talking about, oh, should we, you know, fly business class internationally or something, we're like, oh, it's so expensive. But then we've never done it and remembered it a second after we spent the money. Once the money's gone, it's gone. And it's fine because we can afford it. It's not putting us in any sort of financial hardship. So I do find that once the charge has gone through, I never regret it or second guess it.
A foundation like that has helped Laura a lot in staying true to her values. But for a lot of us, our origin story isn't like that.
I am grateful for my upbringing. Like, I do feel like I have a very fortunate to have a very strong, like, mental health base. And sometimes you hear entrepreneurs being like, you know, I'm motivated by, like, my dad abandoning me, or I have, like, this chip on my shoulder. Like, I'm not motivated by that, which I do think I'm grateful for.
Well, so I genuinely think that's a big part. Like, so many of the founders that I know from a bunch of the communities I'm in, I've had these conversations and I share it in common with them. I'm definitely a chip on the shoulder guy. There's a lot of family stuff that like definitely gives me that drive. And many years of therapy have proven that to be true. I'm always fascinated by folks who have so much more balance and do things intentionally and are healthy, basically. Like, by the way, through all of this therapy, I'm really like, I'm good with it. Like it's just who I am. And I'm like, it's a part of me. And now I understand it. I can work with it in a more intentional and healthy way. And honestly, I'm kind of grateful for it because here I am in a beautiful home with a family that I love and doing work that I find really gratifying. I certainly wouldn't be where I am were it not for that chip on my shoulder. So it's kind of like anyway, there's no one answer, but I think it's really interesting to meet people that are really successful that are also healthy.
And it's something that I've had to learn over the years. So I think a positive thing of being not fitting in various ways. So just being female, obviously, I am always the minority in all the spaces I'm in, you know, embracing the lifestyle business thing, working part-time, having not raised VC. I mean, there's a part of me that wants to kind of like hide it or feel embarrassed about it. Like, oh, I shouldn't say that I work part-time. I should be more ambitious and working full-time. Or I remember when I like first started really working for myself and building a business, I would go to this conference and they'd be like, oh, you know, entrepreneurs all have ADD. And I was like, I don't have ADD. And I was like, oh, I'm not a real entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs have ADD and they have 100 projects going on. And it sounds funny, but even being like, oh, I don't have a chip on my shoulder. We can take anything and be like, oh, I'm not. Real entrepreneurs are crazy and have a million projects and have childhood trauma. And like, we can take anything and be like, oh, that other thing is how it should be. But I think over the years, I've come to embrace like, yes, I am. I mean, I'll always be a woman. If not anything else, that makes me a total outsider. And I absolutely can't change that. So just go with it. Just embrace that I don't fit in. I'm not doing things the normal way. I can always find things about myself that other people will say are not the right way to do it. And I can't change that. So just run with it and do it the way I actually want to do it.
What it comes down to is this. Going into this journey, we all have advantages and disadvantages. If you want to have a healthy relationship with your drive and motivations, you have to understand what those advantages and disadvantages are to you and work through them. That can mean joining a community, talking to friends and family, and it definitely means therapy. But let's hang out here for a second and talk more about Laura's drive. Lots of founders have people they look up to who have built amazing businesses and created huge impact in the world. People like the obvious example, Steve Jobs, and if not Steve, then someone else, some other business person. But Laura's inspiration to start her own business came from a very unlikely place.
So for me, it was actually the freedom that caught my attention. So I had the epiphany. My best friend from university was an actress. So she was living in LA, where I would later move, and I was living in Chicago. And when she would visit me in Chicago, I couldn't hang out. I would work till 6. So we'd have time to have dinner, but that was kind of it. I couldn't take a day. I only had my, American 10 days off a year or whatever. I couldn't take a day off to hang out with her. And when I went to LA, even though at the time she was working at restaurants, it's not like she had some amazing career. She was starting her acting career, working at restaurants, but she had tons of time freedom. When I would go see her, she could hang out with me during the day. She'd be like, oh, I'll just do the shift. I'll do an extra one the day before you come. And I'm like, this is better. I like her life better because she gets to control her days. And that's actually what led me to be like, okay, how could I control my day? And I actually first asked to go part-time was my idea. I'm like, okay, I'm going to have best of both worlds. I'm going to go part-time and start getting my own clients. And actually my boss agreed to that. But then right the day before I was meant to start, I remember she said, well, if you go part-time, everyone will want to go part-time. I was like, well, then I have to quit. And that's what I did.
Yeah. Awesome. So you made the decision for the start was kind of a lifestyle. Is there anything more to that? Was it you just wanted freedom of your time? Was there anything kind of lifestyle wise that you could see even that early that you were kind of shooting for?
Lifestyle and financial, definitely. Because I was in my first job. I think I was making $28,000 a year. And I definitely wanted to make a lot more. I was just doing the math. I lived in Chicago in the time in Wicker Park, and I would look up the house prices for the really nice houses around the park. And I'm like, I'm never going to get that house on $28,000 a year. It doesn't matter how much I save up. The math ain't mathin'. So I definitely thought, okay, I want to have a nice house. I want to be able to go on vacation sometimes. Nothing crazy, but just this salary that I'm at isn't going to let me have the life that I'm looking for.
How much money did you think you needed? Did you have a financial goal in mind even that early?
Yes. I definitely wanted to make 6 figures, which is funny because I think that's still I feel like everyone who starts as an entrepreneur, it's still the same goal is get to 6 figures a year. And that was my goal.
This is also the point in time when Laura starts her first business. She transitioned her freelance graphic design work first into a social media consulting business and then into an online course business. This is back in the 2000s, way before the market exploded.
My first course was about Twitter. The first time I sold it, I made $3,000, something like that. And I was like, oh, I used to hustle to get one client, for $3,000. And now I just did, I would do a live promotional webinar to sell it and make the money. And I was like, this is amazing. And I definitely made 6 figures in the first year of that, but probably before a year in that business.
B-School grew rapidly to the point where it became more than just a side gig. And Laura didn't want that, so she left. She had her co-founder buy her out.
I don't know how else to say it besides it wasn't my calling. I liked it, but I didn't love it. I also knew, so all my course businesses, I was the face of, most course businesses are, right? You're learning from me. And it was the same in B-School. We were both the face of it. In retrospect, I wonder if our partnership could have lasted longer if she had just been the face of it and I had just run it behind the scenes. That might have worked better, but I don't know. We didn't think of that at the time or something. I don't know. So I also had in my head, like I've told you, if I find a better model, I'm going for it. What I didn't like about my model is that it was so tied to me. So the business couldn't really grow without me. It was all tied to me at the end of the day. It wasn't a very sellable business, both B-School and my own courses. So that was something where I was consciously thinking, and for me, like having kids was a big motivator. I've always known that I wanted to have kids. So I'm like, I'm going to have kids in the future. I want a business that I can take a lot of time off from and isn't relying on me like being the live teacher person.
After the buyout, Laura had a decent amount of money saved up.
I had made good money over the years running the course. Like I had made low to mid six figures every year running the course businesses. And, I had never spent a ton. So I already had good money saved up. With selling to my partner, like I was able to buy a house in Venice, California, which is not a cheap place to live. So that worked out well.
But it still wasn't that 5 million goal. So she followed a new passion, software. This time, her partner was her husband.
We met in 2012 and Edgar launched in 2014.
Did you start that with the very clear definition of like, we're building a company to sell it? Was that the plan from day one? Or was the plan to just build a good business and then selling came later?
We were definitely building a company to be sellable. I don't think I was like, I definitely want to sell this. I'm like, maybe I'll love running it for 20 years. But we were building it to be sellable. And a big factor in that story is that I always know when we started building Edgar, because my son was born in January 2015 and Edgar launched like a few months before he was born. So I know
That's
it launched
insane.
at the end of 2014. So we launched this business knowing that I was going on mat leave a few months after the launch. And so now I'm always like, everyone should go on parental leave right after they launch a business, because it was an amazing forcing function that the business had to not rely on me. I'm like, this business can't rely on me because I'm not going to launch it and then have it fall apart 3 months later. Like that doesn't make any sense. And it was bootstrapped, but it was like bootstrap self-funded. Like we used our team from my course business to run Edgar. So we had like right from the beginning, I'm like, we have to have a team in place to run this thing because I'm going to be completely out for a few months. And of course, my co-founder coding it also had a baby, right? And so he wasn't going to be 100% out, but he was going to be largely out also. So we designed it from day one so that we could both take a lot of time off, which in retrospect was just absolutely perfect because that's kind of how we've designed our businesses ever since.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what was your income during those? So you have your baby, you've got the business launched. What were you earning then at that point?
I mean, I feel like I've always kept my salary around like $200,000 a year. And then, my husband would be similar. So like $300,000 to $400,000 combined. That's probably like a before tax number.
Sure. So did Edgar just take off like really fast then? Was the revenue? Yeah. So you were making hundreds of thousands like right out of the gate pretty much.
So Edgar, we hit $1 million in annual reoccurring revenue, I think 10 or 11 months after launch.
Yeah, that's bonkers. That's so cool. When did you decide to sell and when did you sell?
So it all happened very, very quickly. So I was kind of playing around with different ways too. I'm like, do I want this business to just run with a team without me? For a while, I played with like, okay, I'm just going to kind of put it in maintenance mode and it's not going to be actively developed, but it's going to kind of chug along and be a really high cash flow. But then I was like, no, I just feel ready to be complete with it and be done with it entirely. So actually, from when I decided to sell it to when I did sell it was a 6-month process altogether.
And so how much did you sell for?
So I always say single-digit millions is what I sold for. So somewhere between 1 and 10.
How much did you personally make? Like, did that all came to you and your husband, or was there any other kind of partners in it, or did you have any other bills to pay? It was literally just like all the cash straight into your account.
Just the tax man. Yeah, just the tax man. So yeah, 100% of it, was owned by my husband and I, yeah.
That was in 2019, and that's when she hit the initial goal of 5 million. There's a few things to talk about here, and we're going to get to them all. The obvious one is that we're very shortly going to talk about her current net worth and break down her expenses and investments and all that good stuff. We're also going to talk about why she started another business if the goal was to not work. And of course, we'll talk more about how she mentally is able to keep herself from getting to the never-ending treadmill. But first, let's quickly look at how her life changed immediately after the exit. Did you have any celebratory purchases? Did you do anything extravagant at all?
It was mostly sticking in index funds. So we were in the middle of a house remodel. Like, if it was a movie, you would have us buy the house after the exit. But the truth is we had already bought the house and already started the model, before the exit. Okay. The narrative isn't quite as nice. But yes, we did the house to all the marble that we wanted, hired the fancy interior designer, got the fancy custom curtains. I always joke that Japanese toilets were like my trophy for selling my business because we have only Japanese toilets in the house.
I want a fountain to squirt up my butt instead of wiping. That sounds amazing. I'm sold. But they're so expensive. There's a piece of advice we've given a lot throughout this podcast, and the reason it keeps coming up is because it's so important. Having a massive amount of money will change you. It's a bit of a mindfuck, and managing it mentally is a skill you build. So when you're introduced to being wealthy on this level all at once, you rob yourself of that ability to build the skill. Laura didn't do that.
We had always paid ourselves really well along the way. And actually, the way that I think of it was a lot of it was about if your business is having financial troubles, the owner should not be the first to go, which is a lot of people's instinct. If their business, has less cash flow, if revenue's down, they stop paying themselves, which is like, no, the whole point of the business is to pay you. If your revenue's down, you need to cut your expenses. You likely need to cut your team. Don't stop paying yourself because you've missed the point. You've missed the whole point of the business is to pay you. So I always paid myself well over the years. So we were already living the lifestyle that we wanted. And then with the sale of the software business, that's what tipped us over to being able to hit that 5 number, like to have 5, just, not in retirement accounts, not in houses, but just 5 million liquid, in the stock market.
This ties into another core belief that Laura has about business. The point of a business doesn't always have to be about huge growth.
I'm trying to bring back the term lifestyle business, at least in like the startup world. Lifestyle business, people will be like, oh, so is it a growing business or is it a lifestyle business? Does this business actually have value or is it a lifestyle business? It's bad. You don't want to be called a lifestyle business. But I'm like, what is the point of having a business if it's not supporting the lifestyle that you want? I just genuinely don't get it. I'm just like, get a job. If you don't care about having control over your lifestyle, like, get a job. There's lots of them that pay a lot of money and go down that road. So I think the whole point of a business, and I do think that most entrepreneurs are super interested in the freedom and flexibility and control, but then people kind of lose sight of that or don't believe that they can actually have that.
And that ties into another belief that is at the core of her value system: what money is actually for.
The only point of the money is to exchange it for other things. That's the only point of it. Like, it's easy to get caught up in growing the money, but the only point of growing the money is to trade it for like the pizza and the hotel room and the after school club. So if we ever are like, oh, should we be spending this? It's like, of course we should, because that's the only point in having it.
Yeah. But it's so easy to get caught up in a scarcity mindset. Scarcity mindset is kind of a phrase that annoys me, but like, it's easy to come from a position of like, oh, fuck, but what if this all goes away,
Right. And I do think about the what if it all goes away. And I actually think that that's a really useful thing to think about, because if it all goes away, it's like we'll live with our parents and our parents are really nice.
Yeah.
Like that's the worst situation. Like, that's not that bad at all.
It's funny because when I started my business, a lot of my friends, like the people that were not business people or kind of like entrepreneurially minded, a lot of them was like, wow, that's really brave. And I was like, why is it brave? I was just waiting tables, and I had negative money. Right. So like, if this fails, I'll just go back to waiting tables and having negative money and like scrounging sandwiches off people's plates. It's like, it's fine. But
exactly.
But as things grow, that thought gets kind of scarier, and I could definitely feel slightly differently about it now. And here we get into one of the main pillars that support Laura's happy and balanced relationship with her wealth. Wealth to her is lifestyle control, not a number in the bank. The number in the bank is just the item that supports that chosen lifestyle. And that was always the goal for her. But it is time to get into those numbers. So just how much is in the bank?
So now, not including my current business, it's like, I'm just trying to do the math. I think it ended up around like 10 or 11 million, like total net worth. There's a few houses in there, so you're always just kind of making up a random number what they're worth. But so yeah, about 10 or 11 million net worth without my current business. And then my current business, you could call it I don't know, worth about 5 million now. Obviously depends on when we sell it, who wants to buy it, whatever. But yeah, that gives you a ballpark.
Cool. And how much is your house worth?
The house that I live in is worth about 2 million. And then we have about a little more than 2 million in 3 other properties.
So tell me, how do you invest your money? You've mentioned some real estate. So just can you talk to me about your portfolio generally?
Yeah. So portfolio is mostly index funds. So I'm just looking at the price. So 50% is VTI. That's the Vanguard US fund. And then I think about, 25% is Vanguard Global Fund, VXUS. And then about $1 million in a bond fund. And then a little bit in some like REIT and like dividend focused funds, but mostly just really broad index funds.
And what are your monthly expenses?
So I had to look this up for this interview because, as I told you, I had absolutely no idea what my monthly expenses were. I actually didn't even know how much my mortgage was because that comes out of my husband's account, and I didn't know.
That's such a baller move. That's such a baller move. I don't know. It just
well,
comes
it's not
out.
very
Don't worry
much.
about it.
It's not very much. So the mortgage is about $3,000 a month. So I'm sure people are like being like, that math doesn't add up. It's because we didn't get a mortgage we just paid off most of the house and then got like a smaller mortgage. That's how you can have a $2 million house for $3,000. So the mortgage is $3,000 a month, about $700 a month in other house bills, about $1,000 a month on groceries, $900 a month eating out. We don't have a car payment. Kid expenses, my kids go to state school, so we don't pay for school. We pay about $200 a month for a few after school clubs. We pay $300 a month to get our house cleaned every week. And then our big expense, which is harder to put numbers around, is travel.
So that's the big sort of lifestyle decision you've made to enjoy the cash now or kind of live life now. Like, yeah, talk to me more about travel and why you choose to spend so much money on it and kind of how you square the numbers on it and your sort of philosophy around it in general. I'm really interested.
Yeah. So my husband and I love to travel. We also love to travel with kids, which is more unusual than loving to travel. So we've always done months off. So even like when Edgar was like at its height, big thriving business. I remember when my son was 2, we took a month off and went to Japan for a month. So we've always really valued that. And last year we spent 6 months traveling full time as a family. So we went into kind of check-in mode at work. That's the priority for family time. I mean, we were with the kids 24/7. We weren't, just to be clear, we weren't traveling with nannies or anything like that. It made our family so much closer and our kids so much closer to each other. It's where our family feels our truest selves, I guess.
That's so cool. I love it. By the way, I remember ages ago you were talking about hiring a private chef and you had a personal assistant for a while there. Like, do you have any of those things anymore?
We've gone on and off with that stuff over the years, which I think is kind of interesting actually, because I think people tend to view that stuff as like a black and white or kind of a step up in your life. Before we went traveling, we had a chef that made us dinner every night. And when the kids were little, like that was amazing. It was a great use of money. After we went traveling and obviously had to make our own food every day, we kind of decided this is something that we want to do. For me personally, I never learned how to cook. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I have to eat 3 meals a day for the rest of my life. Like I want to add that skill in. And yeah, I've had assistants over the years. Like when I lived in LA, I had an in-person personal assistant, which was amazing. When the kids have been little, like sometimes we have nannies, sometimes we don't, for like various hours. We always try to really check in with like what feels good for this stage of life.
And so other than that, there's really nothing that you spend significant sums of money on. There's not like, big, longevity health spends or fancy cars or private jets or any of this kind of stuff.
No. I mean, so an idea I love from Ramit Sethi is like, think about the things you have unlimited budget for. So we do have a home gym. My husband loves to buy like the most weird random workout equipment. Like he gets into these little he'll be doing this program and he's like, I have to buy this thing to like work my ankle. Like he had this special thing where you move your foot up and down with like a weight on top. I'm like, what is this? It's like the most single-use equipment I've ever seen in my life. So we're like, okay, yeah, any kind of workout thing, health thing, we'll spend unlimited on. And so I do have some travel numbers. Like I just looked up when we were in Spain for a month, we spent about $25,000 total.
So now we have to reconcile something. Laura has focused on wealth building solely to support the lifestyle that she and her family want, and now they have that. But they have since started another business and are currently working on it. So why?
My business now is Paperbell. It's another software business, and I actually started it before we sold Edgar. So along the journey in Edgar, we had a team running it. We were able to play around with other businesses, and we started Paperbell. So even though we could just live off our investments now, we do still love running SaaS businesses. So I am still working now. You know, like I mentioned, we both work part-time, but the business is successful. It does provide us a great income in addition to our investments.
Yeah, okay, awesome. What is that income?
So the current business pays us both about $12,000 a month after tax combined.
But I got to ask, like, if you're happy right now with your lifestyle right now, why bother at all?
I mean, it is something that I check in with myself regularly, and I am still excited about it because and some days I wake up and I'm just like, I'm just ready to sell this today. I'm done with this. But I'm like, oh, but I want to see, we have this project coming up and I want to see where, and we haven't tried this thing yet. So that shows me that I am still enjoying it. And there's still parts of it that I want to grow and I want to explore.
I'm also interested because you've got this financial independence, right? You've got all this money in the bank. It's, you know, you can do the 4% rule and live very comfortably. Were you tempted to swing big? Like you have this platform where you could have gone, all right, we could do another business, which is, you know, a software business, which we can kind of work a small amount of hours and so forth. Like, yeah, is there any part of you that wants to kind of go after like a big thing, that knowing that there's kind of no pressure to like have to succeed?
I just always tell myself that, you know, God willing, I'll have more years. And if I want to do that, I'll do that. So right now, it's not what I want to do. Like maybe after my kids are grown, I'll want to raise 40 million and have that experience. And I can do that if I want to.
Laura knows herself well. She understands what she wants, why she wants it. And because of that, she's able to keep herself grounded. Although sometimes her husband does keep her in check.
I think he's a really good partner for me. You know, I think, yeah, I could have been with someone else who would just encourage me to spend much less time with my kids, to just be working like crazy, to just be completely focused on the business. And I think my life is better for how I live it now.
But not everyone is going to be a good influence, especially in a world where continuous growth is mostly seen as a positive thing. As founders, the urge to compete and one-up the competition is paramount to successful business. But in real life, that strength is a weakness. Laura is constantly around people who are accomplishing more, by certain metrics at least, and are earning much, much more. Here's how she keeps herself from comparing herself to them.
I try to remind myself that everyone's journey is different, and a lot of it is, I was going to say a lot of it is luck, and that sounds like derogatory, but I mean it for myself as well. Like when it's luck, it's motivation, it's purpose. So it's like we're all on different paths, we're all on different journeys, we've all made different choices. Something I always say is like, keep your eyes on your own paper. You know, what other people have done really has nothing to do with me. Like they're not living my life.
Yeah, I just really struggle with that. No, it's not that I struggle. I just compare. It's so easy to compare, and it's so easy to just peer over the fence and go, oh, that looks cushy. When I'm there, that's basically the narrative I always tell myself. When I get to that point, then I'll be set. And I just know that when I get to that point, there'll be the next point that will be the one where I'm set.
Absolutely. And it's helpful knowing people who are farther along on the journey and knowing that they don't have everything figured out. Like, now I'm not talking about anyone we've mentioned on the podcast, but I've met hugely successful people that are just horrible alcoholics and drug addicts and are just like barely making their way through the day, yet somehow are running this $1 billion business. Like absolutely all types of people are very wealthy. Some people get very wealthy just absolutely scamming other people, like just looking at how much money someone has is like not a good metric for if you want their life or not.
Do you think there are people in the founder community that are like you, but don't realize they're caught up in this whole thing of kind of striving and wanting more?
Something nice about being a woman is I find a lot of women are more willing to talk about it. Like, especially, it's really interesting. You and I are in some of the same like entrepreneur groups, and then I'm in like the subgroups that have just the women. And there's so much talk about like, I feel like I just want to kind of step away from my business for a year, and I've given myself permission to do that. And I really want to focus on myself and my own health and my own growth. And like, I think it's brilliant that women are having these conversations. And in some ways it's like, we've already been so dismissed that we're like, well, might as well just quit. Like, you're not taking me seriously anyway. And I kind of want to quit for a year. So like, I guess I'll just go ahead and do it, like, because we don't fit in from the start, like it kind of gives us more freedom. And I think there's probably even more men who are like, oh, I'd kind of like to work part-time and spend more time with my family, but they're like not even allowing themselves to entertain that thought because it's so outside of how they've been taught to be.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for those kind of people?
It's like so cheesy, but you only get one life, it's just what it comes down to. Like something I think about all the time is like, would I feel okay dying today? Something I always think, like, I don't want to die today, but I want to feel like, yeah, if I died today, I was happy with the choices that I made. I was happy with where my life is. I'm so not a believer in this entrepreneur thing of like, oh yeah, you're going to hustle and grind for 5 years, but then it's going to get better. It's like, do those 5 years of my life not matter?
Before we close, there's something important to talk about. This episode is about two things, lifestyle and money. They're two things that are intertwined and severely impact each other, but they are still two separate things. Seeing them as separate things, but respecting the relationship they have is how Laura has been able to find the sweet spot for her and her family's happiness. There's another crucial mistake that people often make when building their wealth, and that is conflating those two things. Money is a way to support the lifestyle you want, but the lifestyle you want doesn't need to be the same as the lifestyle you can afford. Of course, that's only true if you have more money, not less, but that's not what this podcast is about. When you start making more and then upscale your lifestyle to match, you're doing two things. You're shunning away from the part of you that critically thinks about what you actually want, and you start to overcomplicate your life. Laura knows that there are more things she could afford and have, but having those things doesn't mean your life will be better because of them. In fact, it often has the opposite effect.
I've been lucky enough to know a lot of really wealthy, successful entrepreneurs. And I've just been able to see firsthand that a ton of money does not add happiness to your life. Enough money to not have to worry about money is huge, is absolutely huge, right? Like, we don't have to think about which after-school clubs we want to send our kids to. They can sign up for whatever they want. We always buy the organic groceries whenever we want. Like, that's a game changer. That's an amazing life. But adding extra houses in, or having a, $20 million house instead of a $2 million house, or having 4 cars instead of 1 car or whatever, not only does it not increase your happiness, I mean, it can be neutral. Like, if you're someone who likes cars, you can certainly get enjoyment out of buying some cars, and it can be fine and no big deal. But it often comes with massive downsides. But like, a wealthy person that I've known a long time is Noah Kagan. A lot of people listening would probably know who he is. I know, like, he tweeted about recently that he is selling off a lot of his investment properties because, like, he already has plenty of wealth. He doesn't need them.
Right. It's just headache.
Right. If you have the most amazing property manager, they still have to be like, hey, Noah, it flooded. FYI, I've got the flood people out. Like, you still know about what's going on,
Totally.
And I think a lot of people who are more like cognizant of the life they want to live do reach that point where maybe they do make things bigger and then they go back and simplify.
I don't know about you, but I listen to a lot of business podcasts and I find it incredibly easy to get sucked into this game of constantly moving the goalposts and always looking to get to that next level and judging myself based off the successes of other people. But what I find so inspirational about conversations with people like Laura is that level of self-awareness and that ability to understand two things. A, what you need in order to make you happy and understanding what that cap is and not needing to go beyond it. And also this capacity to really enjoy the journey. And that sounds kind of corny, right? But I think it's so important. It's so easy to get caught up in more. But actually, if we're not enjoying what we're doing on a day-to-day basis and doing what we're doing intentionally, then, why did we start a business in the first place? And if this conversation gave you something to think about, you've got to check out Hampton. Hampton is the company that makes this podcast. I'm a member. And inside of that community, people are having conversations like this all of the time. There are members who have got single-digit millions in net worth. There are people like Laura with tens of millions in net worth. There are people with hundreds of millions in net worth. And the conversations that are happening inside of there, just like this, are incredibly open and honest in a way that you just never see anywhere else. And you just can't get access to them unless you're inside a community like Hampton. So I highly recommend it. Go to joinhampton.com. I think you're going to like what's going on in there. This episode was created by Jackie and Alex and the team at lowerstreet.co. It's my company. I've got to give them a shout out. If you want a podcast for your company or yourself, just like Moneywise, then check out lowerstreet.co, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Harry Morton. I'm at Podcast Harry on Twitter, or you can just look us up, lowerstreet.co. Thanks for listening.